Hey there team, welcome back to the channel, welcome back to Worth It Then, Worth It Now, a little side project I run on this channel where I have a look at games of yesteryear. They might not be necessarily in vogue, but generally speaking they're near and dear to my heart. And it's just a good excuse all round for me to shout out things that I want to shout out. I try to line it up with a sale where possible. So today we're looking at Resident Evil 5, which is on deep discount at the moment. And I've been playing through, I've only got some B-roll from relatively late game. I don't think there'll be any spoilers other than a location, I guess. But my God, it's hard to believe all these years have gone by. And what's even harder to believe is this game holds up so incredibly well. 2009 apparently is when it came out in, so 15 years plus change. And I'm having an absolute gay old time playing it. Now, I'm playing it with a mate of mine. We actually started playing it a few months ago, on and off, you know. He had night shift and I work really weird hours with this job. So, you know, we'd be up at 3 o'clock in the morning chipping away at this, and we've just sort of resumed in the past couple of days to pick up where we left off and hopefully actually clock it. We're already planning to get Resident Evil 6 done when that's next. It'll be interesting to see how he reacts to that, because this guy's never played a Resident Evil game in his life. I am very vocally a super fan. Resident Evil might be my favorite video game series, just full stop. And if you're not across it, like, this might all be a lot to take in. I can understand when you're up to a game number 5, and this is from 15 years ago, like, sequelitis and lore oversaturation can just be overwhelming. But I suppose the important takeaway, if I just give you a really dot point of how the timeline worked around the time this came out, is this game was an experimental pioneer into the co-op space. It was the first game formally that did this. I mean, if you want to count the Outbreak games, they were in their own way were trying to do multiplayer online through the bloody PS2 framework for networking, like all sorts of stuff. And there were probably some like light gun games or on-rail shooters, but as far as a core series installment, they really went for it with this and made it essentially a co-op experience. You can play it with the bot and it works, but I would highly recommend playing it co-op. And while I'm on that, like I said, this mate of mine, he's pretty normie. He doesn't play a lot of video games just in general. And I turned him on to, what is it, the first Resident Evil game, the remake? And he bounced off it because he doesn't have nostalgia for the camera angles and, you know, that sort of presentation. But he's even admitted himself, on the back of this experience as an on-ramp, as someone that's just not used to tank controls or anything like that, this has in turn got him interested in checking out the single-player endeavor because we've had such a good time together. So 6 will be next, and Resident Evil Revelations 2, I recall that having a co-op component, sort of like an arcade shooter thing. I can't remember what else is co-op. That might be it as far as the core installments. But yeah, so this was their first real jump into that pond, and I think they absolutely nailed it. Also worth noting, and I brought up fixed camera angles, etc., Resident Evil 4, which a lot of people, normies, consider to be the greatest Resident Evil, and that's because that was a very early example in a game's established series to really pivot genre midway. Like, looking back on it, it was a ludicrous risk they took with Resident Evil 4, but it paid off in absolute returns, because that's where they went from the fixed camera presentation that had been a staple of the series into what was like a proto over-the-shoulder third-person shooter type game, but with these tank controls. You can't move and shoot at the same time, right? Very real limitations, but they built it around it, and it worked. It worked really well. And what it did was take, arguably, like, we're talking pre-indie times, and I'm not calling original Resident Evil indie so much, but it really didn't have the huge mainstream uptick in the West that the series has now. In a time where everything was pretty much AAA, it was niche, but Resident Evil 4 made it explode into the mainstream, and that's why that's considered the greatest one by many, because for many, Resident Evil 4 OG was their first step into the arena that they found actually palatable from a more mainstream perspective. Anyway, so there's your little history lesson. 4 did this over-the-shoulder tank controls, action shooter, drift, let's say, and Capcom are nothing if not slaves to audience feedback, right? So where everyone loved 4 and that it was an explosive hit, 5 continued the I said drift because a lot of people didn't like 6. 6 overshot in a way, but 5 kept moving in that run and gun action perspective. It still has the tank controls, and at first they're really unwieldy in modern day, but we've talked about it, they become second nature. And like I said, we had a break for a month or two there, and we picked it back up the other day, and it was like coming home. So it's one of the weirdest things. The controls are kind of dated, even though they were innovative at the time. However, you spend a little bit of time with them and they become second nature. So I don't know if they're actually dated per se. They're just unusual and off norm, but they work is the point. The idea that you kind of can't really move while you're aiming. You have to take a moment to position yourself, plant your feet, zoom in. There's sort of a slightly longer form of trying to quick scope in like a Battlefield or something, in that, you have this window, you have to steal from the moment-to-moment horror of the game to plant your feet and get your shots off without overcommitting to that stationary moment and getting jumped by the enemies. There's something very cool about it, and as a mechanic, it marries so incredibly well with survival horror. Outside of survival horror, it'd probably be a miserable way to play a game, but it actually really adds to the tension when you've got these slowly lumbering monsters that potentially throw things you can shoot out of the air and all that. So yes, it took everything that Resident Evil 4 laid down and it kind of ratchets it up a little bit. We're not quite up to the boulder punching part. That's going to be hilarious when he sees that. But yeah, it's a bit more action. You've got Wesker drawing obvious influences from Matrix, dodging bullets and that. And it's still great. It is really great. But a lot of people feel that Resident Evil 6 jumped the shark, because if Resident Evil 5 is downstream of 4 in that Capcom gave us more of what we liked in 4, let's say, as a body, as a voting block, Resident Evil 6 was giving you even more of what's downstream of Resident Evil 5. And for many people, that turned into too much of an action run and gun, movie fest type thing, and a lot less with its roots. It'll be interesting going back to it, because I never necessarily disliked 6, but I could see all of those complaints, I believe. And then, lo and behold, you had, I think where did the Revelations fit in? I'm not sure. 1 was much earlier, and I was really late to 1. I've only ever played a little bit of it. That's one of my blind spots. 2 I played. I love that. And that was right at the height of episodic gameplay release, which everyone hates these days. And I actually kind of miss. I think it was clever, but people want their dopamine and they want it fucking now. And I mean, who am I to argue with the masses? I can't remember where it fits in. But 7, let's say, as the core, as the sequel to 6, was actually a stepping back and yet another resetting of the series, given the relative failure of 6. Like I said, Capcom seems to really actually respond well to what the zeitgeist suggests. So 6 was an overstep, so 7 was a reimagining, and arguably 7's the most horror-like game, the most Texas Chainsaw, the most Silent Hill-like Resident Evil game, for a series that I don't consider to be actually scary. Like, I love the series, but it's more zombie schlock than fear-inducing, like something like Silent Hill. But 7 is kind of terrifying, to be honest, especially if you go in blind, you've never played it before. And again, that was a shift in perspective, first person. Still a great game, of course, but anyway, this turned into a little bit of a Soldiers 5 history lesson on Resident Evil, at least in vicinity of Resident Evil 5. The end result is you have a game custom built from the ground up to be co-op, like split screen even. We're playing on Steam over connection, and everything's two-man puzzles. It's really dumbed down puzzles. The puzzles were never really complex in the first place in the original Resident Evils, but Resident Evil 4, again, as much as it's sacrilege to speak against it, was an actual turning point of the ultra simplification of an already simple set of puzzles, and 5 continues that on. So much so, it never gets more complicated than let's push something together because it's co-op, or let's, find 3 pieces of a metal and slot it into a door, right? It's just not that complex. But I would also argue that's not what you're there for a co-op action experience. Chris is a main character who's been, in there since Resident Evil 1, on and off. They have a rotating cast that kind of alternate in a way and mix and match, and I won't get into all of that, but they introduced Sheva, who's, oh my god, she's one of my favourite characters, and to the best of my understanding, I don't think she's ever been in anything ever else. A big chunk of this game takes place in Africa, and she's African herself, local, and part of the local branch of the BSAA, which is sort of like a spin-off Team America World Police on the back of some of the events in earlier Resident Evil games. Also worth exploring, while 4 represented a departure of the traditional format, it also represented a more global look going beyond Umbrella. Don't get me wrong, Code Veronica's and all that, you do globetrot a bit, but I'm talking more about the introduction of, Tricell and BSAA and all these spin-off companies and different viruses, and I think it loses some of the contained magic of the original games, but it's cool anyway. Like, the product's got to grow if it's going to last as a series for 20, 30 years, But Chev, oh my god, she's hot, she's beautiful, she's cool. I get to play her, which is great, because I'm the second player and my mate's hosting. She stands testament as the argument against gamers not wanting strong female characters. She just ticks every single box that anyone could possibly have a box for. That's not a fat, jealous, ugly person. And again, it inherits a lot of the action mechanics and currencies. Like, the shop management is sort of similar to Resident Evil 4, though it is more like between stages you just buy. You sell treasures that you find and you buy and upgrade weapons. So you don't really have the Tetris inventory that you've had in previous games. It's more just 9 slots, which is handy because, 1 through 9 on your keyboard shortcuts directly to that slot. So you might have ammo in the 8th slot that goes in a submachine gun that your partner has, and you can just press 8, run over to them, and share. So, you could argue through a certain lens, if you really wanted to drill down into it, which I'm already running out of time here, that this game is a pretty big departure from Resident Evil. But even in that, it still brings considered mechanics that are really just fun to engage with, single and multiplayer, but definitely it shines in co-op. We've been playing it on the hardest difficulty. We had a real hard time at the beginning. If you've ever played this game, the opening sequence apes the opening sequence of Resident Evil 4, in that you're just getting overwhelmed and stressed out by almost infinite waves of dudes, essentially until a timer runs out and you just have to survive that long. And because, we were jumping into it, we were onto the high difficulty, the unusual tank controls. I get it, and it's a staple, and it's memorable as a sequence, but it is sort of misrepresentative as well, because once we sort of ground up against that and died multiple times, but finally overcame it, the game has been a lot smoother, a lot more consistent, I suppose, since then. So I guess that's my one thought. Maybe you run out and you buy this and you check it out with a mate, because it's only a couple of bucks, seriously. A couple of bucks for an excellent time. This has been a great experience for me that I will remember for years to come. Even though, I've played it before and it's out of date, it's been cool introducing a new mate to it and just hanging out as a twosome, bonding away. But yeah, don't be deterred if you do try this and you feel that intro, that on-ramp is actually a bit rough, because it is. It is rough, but once you get past that opening sequence, I think you're in for an absolute treat. I highly recommend it. It holds up. Like I said, I'm playing it right now. I'll be playing some more probably tonight or tomorrow night. What a great game. And again, so surprised how well it holds up. Alright, that's about it. Go out and check it out, team. Might just leave it there for the time being. I'll catch you guys on the next one.